Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajakacharya Astotaris at the Shishima's Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Iskan Dibidi Kandacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahansa Paravajakacharya Astotaris at the Shishima's Divine Grace Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Jai. Namacharya Shlahadadas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Sekaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasudhi Gaura Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shamakunda Radhakunda Giri Gopatan Ki Jai. Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Navatit Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Ganga Jamunamai Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Maharani Ki Jai. Samaveda Bhaktavrinda Ki Jai. Harinam Sankirtana Ki Jai. Brihat Badanga Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Garanga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 So we're reading from the Bhagavad-gita, chapter 1, text 32 through 35. Okay. So I guess I'll chant the Sanskrit and read the translation and purport. To the right page here. Okay. Kim no Rajena Govinda Kim Bogar Jivitena Va Yeshamarte Kankshitam no Ragyam Boga Sukani Cha Taimi Pashtita Yude Kanam Styaktva Dhanani Cha Acharya Pitara Putras Tataiva Cha Pitamaha Matula Swasura Putra Shala Sambadinas Tata Etannahantam Ichami Gyatopi Madhusudana Api Trilokya Rajyashya Eto Kim Numaha Krite Nihatya Dhartarastrana Kapriti Syaj Janardana. Translation. O Govinda, of what avail to us are a kingdom, happiness, or even life itself, when all those for whom we may desire them are now arrayed on this battlefield? O Madhusudana, when teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, maternal uncles, fathers-in-law, grandsons, brothers-in-law, and other relatives are ready to give up their lives and properties, are standing here before me, why should I wish to kill them, even though they might otherwise kill me? O maintainer of all living entities, I am not prepared to fight with them, even in exchange for the three worlds, let alone this earth. What pleasure will we derive from killing the sons of Dhritarashtra? Srila Prabhupada's purport. Arjuna has addressed Lord Krishna as Govinda because Krishna is the object of all pleasures for cows and the senses. By using this significant word, Arjuna indicates that Krishna should understand. Hang on a second. That Krishna should understand what will satisfy Arjuna's senses. But Govinda is not meant for satisfying our senses. If we try to satisfy the senses of Govinda, however, then automatically our senses are satisfied. Materially, everyone wants to satisfy his senses, and he wants God to be the order supplier for such satisfaction. The Lord will satisfy the senses of the living entities as much as they deserve, but not to the extent that they may covet. But when one takes the opposite way, namely, When one tries to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy one's own senses, then by the grace of Govinda, all desires of the living entity are satisfied. Arjuna's deep affection for community and family members is exhibited here partly due to his natural compassion for them. He is therefore not prepared to fight. Everyone wants to show his opulence to friends and relatives, but Arjuna fears that all his relatives and friends will be killed on the battlefield, and he will be unable to share his opulence after victory. This is a typical calculation of material life. The transcendental life, however, is different. Since a devotee wants to satisfy the desires of the Lord, he can, Lord willing, accept all kinds of opulence for the service of the Lord. And if the Lord is not willing, he should not accept the farthing. Arjuna did not want to kill his relatives, and if there were any need to kill them, he desired that Krishna kill them personally. At this point, he did not know that Krishna had already killed them before their coming into the battlefield, and that he was only to become an instrument for Krishna. This fact is disclosed in the following chapters. As a natural devotee of the Lord, Arjuna did not like to retaliate against his miscreant cousins and brothers. But it was the Lord's plan that they should all be killed. The devotee of the Lord does not retaliate against the wrongdoer, but the Lord does not tolerate any mischief done to the devotee by the miscreants. The Lord can excuse a person on his own account, but he excuses no one who has done harm to his devotees. Therefore, the Lord was determined to kill the miscreants, although Arjuna wanted to excuse them. Om Ganatimidandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshudunalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shubhasukantikamscha Hey Krishna Karana Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpite Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostite Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Priye Panchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, well, first, thank you all very much for giving me the opportunity to speak this afternoon on the Bhagavad-gita. And I'll try to address all the points that Prabhupada makes here in the purports. But it may sound like I'm doing it in a roundabout way, but probably because I am. But I've kind of got my own style. But let's take my word for it. I'm going to be trying to address all the important points Prabhupada made in this purport. So I'd like to start off with like a bit of an anecdote, actually. As Atmanivedana Prabhu mentioned, my service, his book distribution, has been for a long time. And one of the most difficult groups of people that I ever had to distribute to, and I didn't think it was going to be the case, but it was kids in a mall. They were in a store where they were playing video games. It was a special store where they could go into and they sit down, mostly behind a computer. They would be sitting behind the computer. There'd be some stand-up games, like almost like in a pinball arcade, but for the most part, they were kind of sitting and they were looking at a computer and they were playing some sort of a video game. And some devotees I was with, they were suggesting that, yeah, this could be really good. It's all kids, it's all young people, and you got them, they're sitting ducks, they're right there. They should be really easy to distribute to. Anyway, I found out that what I experienced was the opposite. I would go in, I went into the store there, and a young person would be sitting there at the computer, and I'd either sit down next to him or kneel down next to him and try to strike up a conversation. And was I surprised? For the most part, I got ignored, just totally ignored. And if they didn't ignore me in a very irritated way, well, sometimes trying to be as polite as they could, they would go, don't bother me. Can't you see I'm right in the middle of this? They were not. It was like a brick trying to penetrate a brick wall. And it gave me a realization. It gave me a realization because I was thinking, wow, this is interesting. One would think that they would have been interested, but they were so absorbed in the video game, the virtual reality that they were sitting in front of, that they were oblivious, or not, in many cases oblivious, and in some of the cases not interested in whatever it was that I wanted to talk to them about. So when I walked out of that place, I immediately realized, well, there's an analogy here. There's a real good analogy here. And the analogy is that the conditioned souls here in the material world are really in the same situation. We're the souls here in the material world, we're in a virtual reality. In that store there, those kids that were sitting behind those computer screens, their virtual reality was engaging two of their senses, their sight and their hearing. And, they were loaning themselves to it. Like I actually looked up the dictionary definition of a virtual reality. I'll read it because I think it's relevant here. It says it's an artificial environment that is created by software and presented to the user in such a way that the user suspends his disbelief that it's a virtual reality and its virtuality, so to speak, and accepts it as a real environment. See, so in other words, they just, they really buy into it, and they're, enjoying through the character that they are in that virtual reality, to the point where they're, oblivious to their real, the real environment that they're in. So, as I said, the same way, the conditioned soul is doing the exact same thing. I'll paraphrase that definition of virtual reality. It says, it's an artificial environment that is created by Krishna's energies. Daivahi Yesha Gunamayi. In the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna says, this divine energy of mine, consisting of the three modes of material nature. Okay? So the virtual reality that we're experiencing, which goes by the name of the material world, is created by Krishna's divine energies. The three modes of material nature created by Krishna's divine energies. And it's presented to the user, which is us, the soul, Paranjana, which means one who enjoys in the body. Presented to us, the conditioned souls, in such a way that we're not suspending our disbelief in any other reality. We are totally, convinced that is the only reality, and that this is the only reality, and it's the ultimate reality. At least non-devotees are. They don't have a clue that there is any other reality other than this reality. And all our senses are engaged, sight, hearing, taste, touch, smell, and the mind. You see, it's all totally absorbed in this virtual reality of being Paranjana, being one who enjoys in the body. See? And it's actually it's a shared virtual reality, because each one of us is in a virtual reality, and we're sharing the environment with other people, other souls that are in the same virtual reality. So it's interesting in that sense. But, and actually the word virtual reality is kind of an interesting phrase right there, because it's what they call an oxymoron, because virtual and real are opposites. If something is virtual, it's not real. And if something is real, it's not virtual. It's an oxymoron is an apparently self-contradictory phrase or statement. So it is, but so how do we understand it? Well, it's something like a dream. You see, a dream is a dream real or unreal? Well, it's both. See, a dream is a real experience. When you're dreaming, you're having a real experience, but it's not the ultimate experience. Like I think most people would agree that when you wake up from a dream, what you're experiencing when you're awake is more important than what you're experiencing when you're asleep. Although you can't argue that when you're asleep, it's a real experience, but it's not a real important experience, for argument's sake. So in the same way that, to say something is a real experience is not to say that it's the ultimate experience. So in the same way, one of the most important messages of Krishna consciousness is that just as we're awake, when we're awake in material life, it's more important than what we're experiencing in the dreams. So in the same way, when we're awake in spiritual life, it's much more important than material life. Sorry, somebody just tried to ring me and I just canceled out the call, so it went black for a second. So, and that's a big part of the reason why we try so hard to give people Krishna consciousness, because we have this conviction that if we could just allow them to experience the Param Drishva, some real life, spiritual life, then they'll be able to, at least to some extent, to the degree that they're able to experience spiritual life, to that degree they're going to be able to come out of the dream. To give an example, we just went through this whole lockdown, and here in Los Angeles, the temple was closed, fully closed. We didn't even have the morning program. I mean, the pujaris were going there and doing deity worship, but there was no morning program. So it was up to everybody to kind of, get up and do their own sadhana. And the only social congregational activity we had was taking prasadam twice a day. We go down and they would serve out prasadam to the devotees, keeping social distance and the whole works. So to be honest with you, I got a little less regulated. I won't say unregulated, but less regulated. But one of the things that kept me from really sleeping in was I really like watching the sunrise. Okay? So I knew what time the sun rises, and I knew I had to get up at least an hour before that, and to be outdoors, ready to see the whole show. From the first light in the sky, which is 48 minutes before the sun rises, till when the sun rises, and 15, 20 minutes after that, till it gets too bright to see. So that's what enabled me to get up. That helped. And as I was lying comfortably in my bed, but I thought to myself, you know what? I could continue lying here comfortably in my bed and go back to sleep. But if I get up, it's going to be better. It'll be uncomfortable for a few seconds, but then it'll be better because I'll get to go, take a shower, put on some clean clothes, go outside, see the whole sunrise, chant my japa. It'll be a better experience. See, so people can give up a lower experience when they have a better experience. So it's the same thing. We have to give people the opportunity to have that better experience of Krishna consciousness, and then they'll be able to. There'll be a possibility or a chance that they can give up that lower experience. And but once again, back to this point that this is really, we are in this. We're in a like a person who's asleep, just like we're asleep to self-realization. We're asleep to spiritual life. That's the meaning of that song by Bhaktivinoda Thakur. He goes, Jeev Jago, go to Chandra Bole, Kota Nidra Jaya Maya, Pisa Chira Kole. Bhaktivinoda Thakur in the voice of Lord Chaitanya is saying, wake up, sleeping souls, wake up. How long will you sleep in the lap of the witch called Maya? Notice, how long will you be absorbed? How long will you dwell? How long will you buy into the virtual reality illusion of conditioned life? He's saying, wake up, just like somebody who's sleeping and having a nightmare. You want to wake them up so they can get out of it. So that's what the acharyas are recommending, wake up. And then in the very next line, he says, he gives the method, how to do that. Einachio sodi maya nasi bado lagi. Harinama mahamantra lao tumi lagi. He says, I have brought the medicine which will wipe out the disease of illusion from which you are suffering. And it's the Mahamantra, the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. This morning when I was chanting, mostly I'm just trying to chant and hear the mantra, but this verse really kept coming to my mind. Idi sodasakam nam nam kali kalipamasanam I can't remember the Sanskrit so well, but or at all. But the English translation is, and this was the phrase that kept coming into my mind, that these 16 words of 32 syllables, it's the way to counteract the evil effects of the age of Kali. And I thought, now that's pretty significant, because that's exactly what I want for my life. I want to counteract the evil effects of the age of Kali. And the evil effects are all over the place, but a lot of them are just to do with our own mind. I mean, notice by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, it takes you from A to Z, right? The first installment, when you're chanting, is Cheto Darpana Marjanam. It cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years. And it helps you become free from unwanted material qualities such as lust, anger, and greed. The chanting, it purifies the consciousness. And then that first prayer goes on to say, Bhava Maha Devagani Nirvapana. It extinguishes the fire of conditioned life, of repeated birth and death. In other words, the chanting is purifying the consciousness of the influence of the modes of material nature. And it's the only thing that could do that. Well, I mean, it's the only thing to do in the sense that only association with Krishna can do that. Because getting back to that verse in the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, 7:14, after Krishna says, Daivahi Eshu Gunamayi, making the point that this divine energy of his is consisting of the 3 modes of material nature, he goes on to say, Mama Maya Durachaya, it's insurmountable. So in other words, it's not like somebody by any other effort can become free from the influences of lust, anger, greed, being subjected to adiatmic, adibhotic, adidaivic miseries, and being in the cycle of birth and death. There's no way you can wiggle out of that or battle your way out of it. It's only one way to become free from the influence of this Daivahi Eshu Gunamaya, this divine energy of the 3 modes of material nature. And Krishna kindly tells us what that is. In the very next breath, he says, Mamevaye papajante, mayamitam tadantive. But one who surrenders unto me can easily cross beyond it. And one of the first big steps in surrendering to Krishna is to seriously chant the Hare Krishna mantra. That's a really important thing. It's a really important thing for a beginner devotee. It's a really important thing for somebody who's been around for, 5, 10, 15, 20. It's a really important thing for somebody who's been around 50 years. It's always a super important thing to be committed to, every day to get up there, get up and make sure it's like a top priority, in your daily activities. There's one purport, actually it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's a verse where, I can't remember, I think it's Lord Chaitanya instructing you, the Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, but it's talking about the regulative principles of devotional service. And the verse is, a verse from the Padma Purana is quoted, Smartavyam Satatam Vishnor, not Smartavyam Najatu Sit, Sarve Vidi Nisedasur, Etayor Deva Kinkara, that always remember Vishnu and never forget him, that this is the sum and substance of all the regulative principles, and all the other rules and regulations are servants and assistants to this one basic principle. And in the purport to that, Prabhupada explains, there's one sentence where he says, one might have other duties to perform, but one must first abide by the spiritual master's instruction to chant at least 16 rounds every day on beats. So that's something to always, remember. I always try to remember that. And even if for some reason it can't be the first thing that you do, it should be the first priority. So you should have in your mind that today I got to chant 16 legitimate rounds. Really doing it and giving it my full attention as much as possible. Making my best effort to do it in an honest way, trying to avoid the 10 offenses. If I can't do it the first thing in the morning, which ideally we should always try to arrange our schedules that we can do that, then at least have it in your mind that this is when I'm going to do it, and then do it seriously. That's a very important point. For somebody who's desiring to come out of this dream, this virtual reality dream of material, conditioned life. Sometimes Prabhupada used that phrase, perverted reflection. And I was thinking about that. And I think another point about this, how this material world is a virtual reality, or it's another way of saying perverted reflection. Another phrase that could refer to the same thing is a template model. And I looked up in the dictionary with the definition of template. It's a shaped piece of metal, wood, card, plastic, or other material used as a pattern for processes such as painting, cutting, shaping, or drilling. So notice, sometimes, a lot of times, Prabhupada referred to this material world as a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. And I think this phrase template model helps understand it a bit better too, because if you stop and think about it, it's just that. It's like it's a model of the spiritual world, because Prabhupada would say that whatever's here in the material world, it's there in the spiritual world, but in a spiritual form. So here with these material elements, we have a template. I remember, maybe some of you also did this when you were at school as a kid. We had to do this, like an art or science project. We had to make a topographical map of the United States, and we had to show the mountains, and we had to show the rivers, and I remember with paper mache, we kind of built up the Appalachian Mountains, and different part of the map. You build up the Rocky Mountains, and you color it. And that's the material world. It's just that map I made, the paper mache map I made, was a template of the real world. What the United States, the top, really looks like. You're flying up above it in an airplane. But what I made was just a model of it. So this material world is a model. It's a material model. Perverted, that's another way of saying perverted reflection of the spiritual world. But it's, as I said, it's something we really want to get out of here. Actually, Albert Einstein is very famous for a lot of things he did, and probably the most famous. If somebody was asked to, what do you remember about anything Albert Einstein did, they might be able to quote that equation E equals mc squared as being his, that's his probably famous equation. But actually, he said something which, as far as I'm concerned, was a lot smarter. It's a quote, and I remembered it about a week ago, and I just woke up one morning and I didn't even know it was his quote. This phrase popped in my head. I must have heard it someplace, that a problem cannot be solved at the same level at which it was caused. And I looked it up. I Googled it, and sure enough, it's a quote, a statement from Albert Einstein. He said, "A problem cannot be solved at the level at which it was originally caused." And I thought about that. And I said, well, that's our philosophy. That's our philosophy. You have to take it to a higher level. He's right about that. People today, we're trying to counteract all the problems, social problems, what else? Medical, health problems. There's all sorts of problems out there, and everybody's doing their best to counteract them. Basically, they all come under the heading of Adi Atma Gadi Bhokta Gani Daivik. But these are what people don't understand, is these are miseries inflicted upon us by higher forces. In many cases, the demigods and like that. So they can't be counteracted by just any material means. Albert Einstein was right. You have to take it to a higher level, and that's surrender to Krishna. The only way that we can become free from, we individually, or when I say we, I mean individually, socially, as a species, all over the planet, surrender to Krishna. Otherwise, Maya is just going to keep pounding us. How much do we have to get pounded before, how much is individually or as a race, do we have to get pounded before we start to understand that it doesn't work. We have to, we're the root, just like sometimes Prabhupada used this phrase, the root cause of the problem. So there's a root cause of the problem, which is we're souls who were unwilling to serve Krishna, God, favorably. Whether we made that choice in the spiritual world or in Tatashta, I'm not going to go there. I'm not even going to talk about that, because in one sense it's irrelevant. Both parties would agree that the reason we're here in the material world is because we're we're not willing to serve Krishna favorably. Whether we made that choice as souls in the Dashta, or souls in Vaikuntha, or souls in Krishna Loka, irrelevant. That's why we're here. So the root solution is to just properly use the free will and make that choice, make that decision that we're be willing to serve Krishna favorably, and then all these other things will just kind of like be put, will be taken care of, by Krishna as we surrender him. He will remove these different obstacles. Well, certainly individually, you can experience that as you progress in your devotion, in the process or devotional service. You see how Krishna is kind of looking after you. Some nice verses that nicely describe that are found in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. Probably everybody's familiar with them. Tesham satyayuktanam bhajatam pratipurvakam vidami bhuryogantam yenamam upayantite tesham eva anukampartam aham jnanajam tamaha nasyami atmabhavashto jnanadipena bhashvataha. Krishna says, to those who are constantly devoted and who worship me with love, I give them the intelligence by which they can come to me. Out of compassion for them, I, who am dwelling within their heart, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. So that's, a very succinct and nice, accurate description of how it works. We have to make that decision, make that choice that, okay, I'm going to try to surrender to Krishna. And the way to do that is, by following the instructions of the representative, the bona fide representative, the spiritual master. Keep at it. Even when it's difficult, you got to persevere. Prabhupada here in Los Angeles back in 1973 was up in his room, and he was meeting with a bunch of his disciples and some guests. And Vishnu John, can't remember if he was a sannyasi at that time or not. Probably. He asked the question, Prabhupada, how's it going to be possible for a person who's like a family person, a married man? He's got a job and a wife and kids and so many things he's got to deal with in the material. How's it possible for him to be Krishna conscious, think of Krishna? And Prabhupada gave this example that I thought was very, very relevant, very practical. He said it's like a tug of war. He said in a tug of war, you just got to keep fighting, and sometimes you're getting pulled. The other party's trying to pull you across the line to their side, and you have to pull back. And he said if you keep doing that, and he made the point that the way to do that is to chanting. When you're chanting, it's like you're pulling in the tug of war to pull the material energy over to your side. And he said, if you keep trying, then you'll be successful. You'll come out victorious. So he was indicating that it's a struggle, but you got to do that. You just got to be prepared to struggle to remember Krishna. And Prabhupada, he guaranteed that the person who does that is going to be victorious. And how does that work? Well, a little insight to that is given in the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. I think it's text 33. I'm not sure. Maybe it's text 36, where Prabhupada gives the example of the bird who got his eggs stolen by the ocean. And the bird was frantic, a lot of maternal instinct there. And she decided that somehow or another she had to get those eggs back. So her strategy was she just started taking a mouthful of water from the ocean and flying back onto the land and, spitting it out on the land. And she just kept doing that. And, I think Prabhupada says in that pulpit, the ocean was laughing at her attempts. Anyway, she was determined, and somehow or another Garuda became aware of her plight and situation, and he took compassion upon her, and he appeared on the scene, and he threatened the ocean that, you better return those eggs, otherwise I'm going to take this task up and, deal with it my way. And the ocean just went, okay. And he returned the eggs. So it's like that. You see, it's not like it's not like our endeavors is the ultimate determining factor. No, not at all. It's Krishna's mercy. It's Krishna taking compassion upon us. If Krishna sees that we're trying, if the spiritual master and Krishna sees that we're struggling, we're conditioned souls, but we're struggling to try to, engage favorably in devotional service, then, Musyami Atma Bhavashto, Jnana Dipena Bhashva. Krishna destroys with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance, out of compassion on us. So it's a reciprocation. Progressing in devotional service is not a mechanical process. You know, it's a relationship, and Krishna's observing, his devotees and how we're trying, and he reciprocates with that. Okay? So that's probably one of the most important things a person can always try to remember, in trying to progress here, advance in Krishna consciousness, that when you start engaging in devotional service, you're entering into a relationship. It's a spiritual relationship that you're entering into with the spiritual master, the Prabhupada, the sixth succession, Lord Chaitanya and Krishna, all their associates, Krishna, all his associates. You're in a relationship, and Krishna is watching, he's observing, he's aware of everything. He's aware of, in the introduction of the Bhagavad-gita, Prabhupada says Krishna is aware of the psychic movements of every living entity. What to speak of his devotees? He takes special. There's that verse in the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita: Samaham sarvabhuteshu name dvaistosti napriya ye bhajanti tumam bhaktya maiti teshu chapiham. Krishna says, I envy no one. I'm equal to everyone. But he says, but one who is engaged in my devotional service, to him I am a friend. I'm in him, and he's a friend to me. Krishna admits, he acknowledges, yeah, I'm partial to my devotees. I'm partial to the devotees. It's like Prabhupada gives the example of, you can't accuse a father of being partial towards his own children. He might be nice to all the children, but it's natural, it's understandable that he's going to have some special kind of affection for his own children. So people who are trying to become devotees, it's like you're acknowledging that you're part of Krishna's spiritual family. And Krishna appreciates that, because that's our constitutional position. That's the correct position to be in. And he reciprocates and he helps. Now, relating to today's verse here, Prabhupada at one point, there's a lot of interesting statements here, but one I really like was where Prabhupada goes, but when one takes the opposite way, namely, I like that phrase, when one takes the opposite way. So we're here in this material world. The human form of life is meant as an opportunity to learn how to take the opposite way. Conditioned souls are here trying to gratify their senses, become happy in that way. But Prabhupada's suggestion here that when we take the opposite way, namely, when we try to satisfy the senses of Govinda without desiring to satisfy our own senses, then by the grace of Govinda, all desires of the living entity are satisfied. But so that's the essence of the philosophy. But sometimes it's easier said than done, because we're so conditioned, and sometimes, like in the case here of Arjuna, he's having a tough time figuring that out, seeing that, at least at this point. Because in Arjuna's case, it's a lila. He was placed into illusion so that the Bhagavad-gita could be spoken. We could have these instructions. But for many of us, it's kind of like we struggle with that. I mean, we're more like the person Arjuna who's being described. We're trying to engage in devotional service, surrender to Krishna, but satisfy our own senses at the same time. I'll give a couple of stories that kind of make that point from my own experience. Before I joined, I was at 18 years old. My uncle was a doctor. He got me a job in the Parkchester General Hospital as a male nurse's aide. And so one of my duties there, among others, was to get people from their bed into a chair and then get them from the chair back into the bed. These are people who are old, and they were sick, and they couldn't do it for themselves. And if you've ever been in that situation, sometimes we tend to think, oh, wouldn't it be great if we could just lie around in bed all day? But no, it's not. You get uncomfortable. You got to get up and move after a couple hours or something like that. And same thing, if you're sitting in a chair, yeah, it's nice for 15, 20 minutes, but when you have to sit in a chair for 3, 4, 5 hours, and especially if you're not able to move around very much, it becomes uncomfortable. So anyway, I had to get them out of and these were older people and they were sick. So I had to get them out of the bed and put them in a chair, or get them out of the chair and put them into the bed. So this is what I experienced, and I thought this was, once again, it's an analogy. These people would be sitting in the chair, and they press there had a light, a buzzer that made a sound, put on the light, and they'd be moaning and groaning when I got there. Oh, please get me out of this chair, help, get me out of this chair. And I could see they were really uncomfortable, and they were, as I said, they were more than just kind of like pressing the button. They were moaning and groaning and kind of begging, please get me out of this chair. They were so uncomfortable. So I said, okay. At that time, I was 18 years old, as I said, and I used to play a lot of sports and lift weights and all that kind of stuff. So I was in, good shape, and I felt like I was really confident about my strength and my ability to help these people out of the chair. So I would say, okay, look, here's what we're going to do. I'd say, I'm going to grab you from underneath your arms. You just put your hands behind my neck, okay? And then I'm going to grab you from underneath your arms, and then I'm going to lift up, and just, and I'm going to back up, simultaneously back up. And you just kind of use whatever strength you have to kind of get up. But even if you can't do it at all, I'll be able to get you up, and, just as long as you don't fight me. Anyway, I'll be able to get you up and put you in the back of the bed. Don't worry. So, and as I said, I mean, it really would have been no problem, except for what happened was, despite the fact that they were going, oh, get me out of this chair. When I started to do it, when I kind of had my arms underneath their armpits and started to lift up, they had their hands still on the rail, the chair, the side of the chair, and they'd grab on for dear life. See? And I, I couldn't lift them and the chair up. And even if I couldn't put the chair in the bed. See, so I said, what? And I'd say to them, I said, hey, relax, don't worry. You're not too heavy. I can do this. Just all you got to do is just trust me, just let go of the, release your grip, relax your grip. Don't grab onto the chair. Just relax. And when I start lifting up from underneath your arms, just whatever strength you got, just try to get up, and we'll do it. But they were insecure. They were insecure. So I had to call for help. I had to get, two other nurses there to pry open their hands. And then when they pried open their hands, then I'd be able to lift them up, and then we'd pick them up and put them in the bed like that. And the same thing from getting them to the bed and to the chair. So we're like that a bit in the neophyte stages of devotional service. One part of us is going, oh, Krishna, help me, get me out of this material world. But, another part of us is still grabbing on for dear life. We still have, we're attached, and we're not out of the illusion yet that we're still thinking we can maybe find some happiness in, material life in some way or another. So we're clinging on to that for dear life. So Krishna sometimes has to pull us out. He has to pull us out. I had another experience, which I thought was a good analogy. It's a little personal, but I'll tell it just for the sake of making the point. I had to have, many years ago, when I was in college, I was teaching a friend how to drive a Volkswagen Combi van. And I thought I was doing a pretty good job, but actually I guess I wasn't, because at one point something happened and he started losing control of the vehicle, and it turned on its side, and it just flipped. And the top, the hood, the roof of the car just kind of peeled open like a can of sardines, like you peel open a can of sardines, pardon the analogy. And I got smashed onto the, we were only going about 25, 30 miles an hour, but that's still, it's fast. And I got just smacked out onto the pavement there on my back. I landed on my back, couldn't breathe. And I thought, this is it. I'm going to die, Fortunately, I just got the wind knocked out of me, and I caught my breath. But by that time, they'd called the ambulances and stuff like that. It took me to the hospital. Anyway, when I got to the hospital, everything was fine. No broken bones, nothing. But I couldn't pass water. Somehow or another, it was like a traumatic. It triggered off the trauma. Triggered off a urethral stricture, which was a problem for years and years and years. And it was like an ongoing long problem. But anyway, to get to the point of the story was, so recently I had to have something done about that. So I went to the hospital, and for what I thought was going to be a very routine type of thing, they do something, it's called a dilatation, where they, it's a procedure. It's not even considered an operation. And, they just do something so they make it easy for you to pass water. So I got there and, they interviewed me and, we talked and like that. And I said, okay. And then they started the thing. And then I realized, wow, these guys are having a tough time, and I could see they were kind of struggling to do what they had to do. And I was thinking, well, that's strange. It worked out. It was kind of like it became, anyway, I kind of left it too long, So but I already signed the release papers and everything saying that, yeah, I don't hold you responsible, do what you got to do. So they just kept at it, and it was getting uncomfortable. And then it got, but they kept at it and they weren't experiencing any success. And then it really was getting uncomfortable. So it got to a point where I was going, okay, yeah, listen, guys, forget it. It's okay. Don't worry about it. Forget the whole thing here. This is what I had in mind. It's not what I had in mind. So let's just, forget it. Don't worry about it. We'll figure it out, do it some other. But no, see, in other words, I was the patient. So I thought I was calling the shots, because, being the patient and being, it was my body and they should listen to me. But they were, as I said, I already signed these release papers and they were determined not to do what I wanted, not to give me what I wanted, but to give me what I needed. And they just plowed ahead, despite the fact that I was going, hey, whoa, hang on, no, this is, no. They knew the surgeon or the guy, urologist, knew his job well enough to know that, no, you're not going to get hurt and nothing's going to, bad is going to happen to you. It's just going to, it's going to be uncomfortable, but we're going to do it. We're going to do the job and we're going to solve your problem. In other words, I was interested in the prayas, what was going to be immediately comfortable, but he was interested in shreyas, what was going to be ultimately beneficial. And I had no choice. I surrendered. I just had to tolerate the whole thing. And sure enough, he did a good job and it worked. But one's point being that we're kind of like conditioned souls, even devotees in the neophyte stage. We're in a situation like that. Sometimes Krishna has to, make an arrangement to help us get free from some attachment. And it can be difficult. It puts us in a difficult situation. But we should have faith that, we're coming to Krishna in good faith. We're trying to surrender, with sincerity. And if these difficult situations come up, we should just take it as Krishna's mercy. It's Krishna trying to help us get free from these material attachments. Just like I was trying to help those people when I was trying to get them out of that chair and put them into bed, or like this urologist was trying to help me, despite the fact that it was really uncomfortable and I didn't, mentally, physically and everything, but, he was interested in doing what was going to be ultimately beneficial for me, not what was going to be momentarily comfortable. So it's a good thing to bear in mind. And I think that's kind of like along the lines of that verse, Tatenu Kampam Susamikshama Bunjana Ivatmakutam Babakam. It's in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, I think it's chapter 14, text 8. Prabhupada says this should be the motto of devotees, the nectar devotion of devotees advancing in Krishna consciousness, that we have to take these things as, coming from Krishna and take it as Krishna's mercy. It's for our benefit, and we just have to tolerate it and just keep on going with the devotional service. And maybe not immediately, but ultimately it's going to be, for our benefit. Krishna's trying to take us, kicking, maybe kicking and screaming, but Krishna's trying to drag us to pure devotional service. It's kind of, it's like that second story I told. When I knew I needed to have this medical treatment done when I signed the papers. Once you sign the papers, then you've kind of like waived your rights to protest and just run out of the operating room. You got it, and Krishna knows that. So we've come forward to become devotees of Krishna. Some of us have, we've committed so that we're going to chant 16 rounds, follow the 4 good principles, and get, some of us have taken initiation. That's like signing those papers. And now Krishna's going to do whatever he has to do. Hopefully he'll be able to do it all in this one lifetime. But if not, he's going to just keep doing it until he is able to extricate us from this material world, and take us back home, back to Godhead. So I have no idea how long I've been talking for, but maybe I'll stop there and see if anybody has anything they'd like to say or any questions they'd like to ask.
So if you have a question, you probably know the drill. You can unmute yourself and talk or something, or maybe if you don't have audio, you can send a chat message and I'll say the question to Bhrgupati for you. But let's not be shy. Someone ask the question. Bhrgupati Prabhu, is your last two stories anecdotes? Are they they remind me of I don't know if the pastime that Prabhupada describes, if he describes it the same every time, but maybe you probably know it better than me. Maybe you can say where there's the disciple in the forest with the tree. You know that one?
Oh yeah.
Can you tell that to us?
The disciple in the forest with a tree, and the disciple is well. Let's see if I do remember. He's grabbing onto the tree, and he's grabbing onto the tree, and simultaneously he's going, "Let me go, let me go, let me go," right? But he's grabbing onto the tree. It's not that the tree is grabbing him; he's grabbing the tree. So in the same way, in illusion, we're thinking that Maya is holding us, but we're holding Maya. We're making that choice. It's I think my understanding of how it works is it's like a cause and effect relationship. When you make that decision that you're not willing to serve Krishna, then you're going to become attracted to Maya, and then it's inevitable. You're going to be. You're forced almost to be attracted and want to enjoy the material energy. So, you have to make, as I said, there's a root cause and a root solution. The root solution to the whole problem of being attracted to the material energy is to make that choice that you're have a willingness to serve Krishna, a willingness to surrender to the instructions of the spiritual master. And then, to that degree that we do that, the material energy will relinquish its grip upon us. You see, I'll give you one more story actually, since it seems to. Back in, I guess it was 1979 and 1980, I was in Australia, as I mentioned, for 11 years. And there was a point in Australia, not too long after I got there, about 1979, 1980, when our temple authorities stopped book distribution. And the reason for that is because it was becoming counterproductive. What happened was there was the books were being distributed by what's called a BBT party. It was a group of Prabhupada disciples, and they were, they'd been in the movement like myself about 5, 6, 7 years at that point, and they'd been book distributors that whole time. They were good, solid devotees, but what happened was that all the temple presidents, not all, but quite a few temple presidents, different parts in Australia, had either fell down or left or something like that. So they all had to be replaced. So these devotees, who were the BBT party, they became the temple presidents of the different temples in Australia. And then the devotees who replaced them as the book distributors, they were all these very new devotees. They've been devotees like maybe 3 years at most. Some of them 1, 2. So they were relatively new devotees. They were relatively young people, and they were very inexperienced book distributors. So they were going out on the street, and what was happening the other thing was, back in those days, they didn't have any Indian congregation. It was the way the temples were being supported was by the profit from book distribution. So immediately they inherited a situation where they were under a lot of pressure. Not only did they have to distribute the books, but they had to they were supposed to get a certain amount of profit every day. So, and they were, as I said, they were young people, young devotees and inexperienced book distributors. So they went out there and they were kind of trying to do it. They were doing their best, but they were just disturbing the public. People were becoming irritated by their methods of trying to give them the book and get a donation. And if they didn't get a proper donation, they would be trying to take it back, and all sorts of things happened. And the people were complaining to the news, to the media. Eventually, what happens is one television station came out there and disguised and set the devotees up. Had somebody walk and accept the book, and then when they didn't give the donation, the devotee tried to get it back from them, and then the person's the whole big tug. It's all filmed, Anyway, so the PR got so bad, devotees started looking so bad because of the way they were distributing the books, that the leaders decided to just stop it for the time being. We started selling paraphernalia, and we sold these candles. I don't know, probably before your time, but they were candles that devotees made, and they were carved in a sort of a decorative way. And we used to kind of sell those shop to shop, office to office, kind of door to door type of thing. And that lasted for about a year. And then after that, the next big thing was selling these mass-produced paintings from Hong Kong. Anyway, so when we got to that level, some of the places we used to go to industrial areas. This is the point. So we go to these industrial areas, and with these factories, a whole big place of factories. But along with the factory, usually there'd be a corporate office. You didn't generally have the factory all of a sudden just out in the middle of nowhere. Sure, the factory was there, but in the front part, as you came off the street, the first thing you'd come to is the office. And when you went in the front door, the first person you would meet was not the owner or the managing director, but it was like receptionist. And my job was to get back there, into the factory and show all the workers, the paintings, because they'd love to stop working and just waste time and look at, or even to get in there and show the executives, or even the managing director, if I could. But the receptionist, her job was to make sure that nobody like me got past her, you see? So I always, once again, I think in terms of analogies, because that's Maya. Maya is like that, that front desk receptionist. Her job is to make sure that only somebody with really legitimate business gets in there. She didn't want me, getting by her and wasting the times of the workers out the back, or even wasting the time of the managing director, who might be too polite to just tell me to get lost. He might look at the paintings and even buy some, But her job was to make sure that unless you have an appointment, some legitimate business, no, you're not getting past me. Sorry. And that's Maya's job. Maya's just like that. Her job is to make sure that only people who are really sincere are, are readmitted into the association of Krishna and the devotees. You see? So that's why we struggle. And Maya is testing us. Prabhupada said that. Maya is testing us. So until we become, really surrendered, sincere, determined, then, then Maya is just going to keep, offering resistance like that, and making it difficult for us to get that association. But once we surrender sufficiently, then the boss comes out and he just goes, okay, it's cool. Don't worry, this guy's okay. Just let him in. So it's the same way. Maya is a servant of Krishna. So when Krishna is satisfied, when the spiritual master is satisfied, super soul, whatever, and when they're satisfied that we're sufficiently determined and sincere, and then they just tell Maya, okay, leave this person alone. They've made it. They're qualified. They're eligible, and we're readmitted into the association of Krishna and his devotees. So sorry, what was the question? Or about the disciple grabbing the tree? Yeah. So Maya seems we're attracted, but we have to understand that attraction to the material energy is like a punishment, and that punishment will be removed when we just keep surrendering more and more. It's like. Yeah, we're just being, how would you say it, controlled by the external energy, but that will be removed from the picture if we just keep trying to surrender to, instructions of the spiritual master like that.
Prabhu, I have a follow-up question then.
Sure.
So why is it that people who are they're thinking that they want to be free from the grips of the illusion of this material world, Maya, as you described it. Why is it that they're thinking that they want to be free without realizing that they're holding on? Why is it that they're thinking that Maya's imprisoning them, or keeping them in bondage, when in fact they're keeping themselves in bondage? Why do they miss that?
Well, because Papa would make the point that the vast majority of human beings in the world today are pretty conditioned and pretty fallen. So, but basically, the mentality is people want to have the kingdom of God without God. They want to be able to be here in the material. They want to be free from the miseries of material life, but without having to surrender to Krishna. So I think that's the kind of at the heart of the problem. Does that kind of relate to what you're saying there?
Yeah. So I think so, Bhrgupati Prabhu, but still I'm wondering, but what makes them think that Maya's Maya, the illusory energy of the material world, is keeping them in illusion, instead of their thinking, I'm keeping myself in illusion? You follow me?
Yeah. Well, there's that verse in the third chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. I think it's Avritam Jnanam Etena Jnanino Nichavarina Kamadupena Kunteya Duspadena Alenacha. Thus a man's pure consciousness is covered by his eternal enemy in the form of lust, which is never satisfied and burns like fire. So that's when we give up that, when we're not willing to serve Krishna, you become covered by the material energy, and then your pure, thus a man's pure consciousness is covered by his, you become covered, basically. You become covered. As soon as you make that decision that I don't want to serve Krishna, you become covered by the illusory energy. And then your mentality is not your choosing. It's just like once you commit the crime, then you don't get to choose your sentence, where you're going to go to jail or what kind of sentence you could serve. That's imposed upon you, you see? So once the conditioned soul, once the soul makes that decision, I don't want to serve Krishna, then, everything else is imposed upon you, So I think that's the best I could do, kind of understanding that.
Well, how about this though?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm still going on with this, but
no, go ahead.
Okay, so how about this? I mean, I guess what I'm thinking is it's sort of like, okay, so let's say I was dealing with a situation today where they were alleged to have committed a crime. Okay, well, let's say that for this, I don't think they did, but for this example, let's say that someone commits a crime. So there's two ways that person who committed the crime can look at the situation. One is they committed the crime and they realize they committed the crime, and it doesn't mean that everything's okay. They committed a crime, but at least they're aware of it, right? And then there's the other person. He commits the crime and he doesn't even he doesn't realize, he certainly doesn't admit, but he doesn't realize that he committed the crime. So both persons, they're sort of in trouble with the material energy, right? They're entangled in the material world. But one of them, he knows that, and the other one doesn't. And it seems like the example that we're talking about here, where we're talking about someone who's attached to the material world and yet is asking for help to become free from it. This person doesn't realize how that they're so entangled, they're causing their own entanglement. But there's someone else, like they could be aware of it, right? That I'm entangled in this material world, and I'm the cause of it. And I almost feel like when you become a devotee when you start to become a devotee of Krishna, the sign of your advancement as a devotee is you start to realize how you're kind of attached to the material world. So I feel like the devotee who's sort of growing as a devotee, he's sort of that category of person who says, wow, I've committed some, I don't know if you want to say crimes, but I've committed some mistakes here in the material world. I'm entangled in it, but I'm aware of that. And now I'm trying to rectify the situation. And the people who aren't devotees, they're like lost in the material world. They don't even realize it.
Yeah, right. I would agree with that. But and even when somebody becomes a devotee, it's a process. It's not like a decision. It's not something that happens. It's not like an event that happens in a single moment of time. But you just kind of keep. You have to keep working on that understanding. You have to cultivate that mentality that you were describing. It's not enough to just understand it once in one moment, because you're going to forget it again. You're going to, and you're going to have to remind yourself again. You have to. That's why there's a lot of repetition in Krishna consciousness. I mean, in case you didn't notice, we chant the Hare Krishna mantra 1,728 times a day minimum. We're hearing the same philosophy every day for as many, days as you're in the movement, because, we tend to, as conditioned souls, we tend to just forget the whole thing, but we have to be constantly reminding ourselves of the philosophy, which is, what you were describing, that person who's kind of starting to understand that, hey, actually, I have something to do with my situation here. I'm here because of mistakes I made. But you have to cultivate that mentality. That's a big part of the process of devotional service. There's that verse, Lord Chaitanya prays, Ainanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddho Kripaya Tavapada Pankajas Titadudi Sarvasam Pachintaya. O son of Maharaj Nanda Krishna, I am your eternal servitor. This is kind of like, Prabhupada actually gave this once as the definition of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra in 1977 in Mayapur, the last public lecture he gave, actually. He said, well, public in the sense of, to the body of disciples at that time. I am your eternal servitor. Somehow or other I've fallen to this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from this ocean of death and place me as one of the atoms at your lotus feet. So, becoming a devotee, chanting Hare Krishna, it's just cultivating that mentality. It's as I said, it's not something that's going to happen all at once. We've got to work at it. Well, if nobody has any questions, I'd like to read you something. This is from a book called Human Devolution. It was written by Jutta Karmadas under his karma name, Michael Cremo. And there's a couple paragraphs here I thought were really far out that really helped me appreciate the relevance of our whole picture of reality. Okay? So I'm going to read right from the middle of a paragraph here. It says here, materialists oppose the introduction of a transcendental realm which exists outside the material universe, knowable by science. But even the materialist cosmology of modern science sometimes incorporates a quote-unquote transcendental realm. That is to say, a realm that exists beyond the universe knowable by traditional methods of modern science, and from which that universe emerged at the time of the Big Bang. So in other words, so they don't like the idea that we say there's the kingdom of God or a spiritual world, but even science, in order to give us this whole idea of the Big Bang, which is their version of how things came about, they invoke as Jutta Karma points out, a transcendental realm. And it goes on further to describe it here. It says, this transcendental reality existing beyond time and space and matter is called the quantum mechanical vacuum, and is pictured as a pure energy field in which particles appear and instantly disappear. From this sea of virtual particles, some go through a process of expansion that keeps them in existence. According to many cosmologists, our universe is the outcome of one such expansion. So I think he's nicely described there, their picture of reality. Okay. So then he goes on here to make a comparison, contrast the two worldviews, two pictures of reality. He says, so both the Srimad Bhagavatam and widely held versions of the Big Bang cosmology of modern science posit an eternal transcendental existence from which our universe of matter, with its features of time, space, arises. Okay, now if you can get somebody to admit to that, and which he says here, once this is admitted, then it's really good the way he does it. He says, we can then decide which version of ultimate reality has the most explanatory power when applied to the variegated reality of our experience. Modern cosmologists and other theorists have a great deal of difficulty in coaxing a sufficient amount of variety from the rather smooth and featureless universe that, according to theory, expands from the quantum mechanical vacuum. The origin of consciousness also poses a difficult problem. In light of this, an ultimate reality that is itself variegated and conscious, like ours, might offer a solution. So I read that because I love that. I just think that Judith Karma did such a great job there in a couple of paragraphs of, kind of summing up the two different worldviews and showing logically, reasonably how what we're offering is really, something that somebody might want to give serious further consideration to based upon those points he made.
Sasha, do you have something to say based on your mathematical background after hearing about this reading from True to Karma? Sasha just got his PhD in math, so.
Okay.
Sasha, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure about this last piece. But I wanted to ask, before, when you were describing, when you were talking about virtual reality, and when you gave example when people were playing arcade games, and their two senses were fully immersed in that, but other senses were not. So when we are in this material world, so it's I just wanted to clarify, it's only our material senses are immersed into here, but we have spiritual senses as well, right?
Yeah, we have spiritual senses. And if you go in the fourth canto and you read that whole those chapters about King Puranjana, I think it's chapters 25 to 29. It kind of describes the whole thing. King Puranjana he's got his own senses. He's a spiritual living entity, but he becomes attracted to this woman who represents material intelligence, and the material intelligence gives him the understanding of how he can, enjoy within the material world. So, yeah, we have spiritual senses, but it's kind of here's what I'm looking for. When you come into the material, it's like you turn your power of it, you give the power of attorney to the material due to the influence of false ego. You're giving power of attorney over to the material mind, senses, and intelligence, and that's what we've done. We've given power of attorney over to the material energy, basically. That due to our desire not to serve Krishna and want to enjoy separate from Krishna in an attempt to imitate Krishna. So, yeah, we do have spiritual senses. Actually, here, I'll read you something interesting here. This is from this same section where Buddha Karma is talking about this. He says, if the self tires of the artificial material reality and desires to return to its original position, the unknown friend, this the super soul of Agyata, will reawaken the original spiritual senses of the self and reconnect them with their spiritual sense objects. See, so that confirms what you were saying, that the spirit soul has original spiritual senses, and when we finally are fed up with trying to the artificial material reality, and we don't want to enjoy it anymore, we're really trying to surrender to Krishna, then maybe it's not at one moment, but maybe over a period of time. Once again, it's a process. What happens is our original spiritual senses will be reconnected with their spiritual sense objects. That's like another way of saying that verse from the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna says, I will destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Krishna will allow us to understand what Prabhupada was talking about in today's purport, about how our real position is to try to please the senses of Krishna. not to try to, in illusion, satisfy our material senses, but in enlightenment, try to satisfy the spiritual senses of Krishna. And we have spiritual senses. And with our spiritual senses, we're supposed to satisfy Krishna's spiritual senses. That's that verse, how's it go? Sarvo padi vinirmuktam tattva bhartena nirmalam rishikena rishikesha sevanam. Bhakti, that we have to try to learn how to serve the senses of the master of the senses. Use our spiritual senses, which are originally spiritual, to serve the senses of the master of the senses, Krishna.
Where did you read it from? Like the last quote?
Oh, I'm reading from a book called Human Devolution.
Ah, okay.
It's written by Druta Karma, Michael Cremo, and it's kind of hard to get a copy now, but it's an incredible book. It's a fabulous book, and if you can get a hold of a copy, you thoroughly enjoy reading it, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, Bhrgupati Prabhu. All right.
Yep.
We have another question.
Go for it.
This time, it's from our Dr. Raphael, who, for some reason, is not going to verbalize the question, but he wrote it, so I'm going to verbalize it for him.
Okay, sure.
Okay. As Vaishnavas, as devotees of Krishna, what can we learn from this pandemic and the war against this coronavirus?
Well, a lot of things, I guess. Let's see. I'll start the ball rolling, but others can pitch in too. Well, one thing is, I think the pandemic is a reaction to sinful activity. It's like in philosophy, you have an immediate cause and a remote cause. So it's always a good idea, and devotees do this almost like, as a knee-jerk reaction. They're always trying to say, well, what's the real cause? I mean, the remote cause is more or less the real cause. The immediate cause is not necessarily the actual, cause. So in this case with the pandemic, it seems like somebody might think, oh, the cause is, the virus went from the animals to that's the immediate cause. The remote cause is that people have been so sinful. The human race has been so sinful for so long. And there's just a buildup of some reactions to sinful activities. And this is just a way in which it's manifesting. So, I mean, okay, sure, you got to take the immediate steps to kind of be more hygienic and be more careful about how, your food comes to you. But, I mean, what about stop killing the animals? Somebody might, I mean, if you Google it, how many animals are killed daily worldwide, it's in the billions. It's in the billions, and for a year it's in the trillions, and it's totally unnecessary. The human race is just clocking up such incredibly bad karma, much more so than previous generations, because unfortunately, now all this modern technology, people in the past, they might have been just as lusty to eat meat, but they didn't have the ability to do it. They just didn't have the technology. Now all this modern machinery and technologies, it's just making it so much easier for people to slaughter even more animals than what they were previously doing. And there's a reaction for that. There's reaction for that. So if you don't want to suffer from sinful reactions, so here's one lesson. You asked me what lessons can we learn? Here's one lesson. If you don't want to suffer from sinful reactions, then stop performing sinful activities. That's a very good lesson to learn for the human race and for devotees. We're actually, we don't have to, there's different ways of learning. One way is you can learn from experiencing it. Another way you can learn from seeing somebody else. The best way is to learn from hearing, but you can also learn from seeing what's happening to other people, and to just, be careful not to make the same mistake. So I think that's something we can learn from the pandemic. The human race is kind of suffering from the pandemic, from these social unrest because of this, systemic racism. And we could see that, look how, these people have made mistakes. The human race is making mistakes about how they're treating animals, how they're treating other human beings, how they're treating the environment, and look at the consequences. So we're not going to do that. I don't want to on a personal level or, in a social level. I don't want to see that, experience those types of suffering. So let's eliminate the activities that cause an effect. If you don't want the effect, get rid of the cause. The cause is engagement in sinful activities. That's what's causing all these problems. So I would say that's the main lesson to learn from, or one big lesson to learn. And of course, as we discussed in the class, that really, if you want to become free from engaging in sinful activities, you got to surrender to Krishna. It's not like you can say, well, I don't want to surrender to Krishna. I want to become free from sinful activities, but I really don't want to surrender to Krishna. It's not how it works. There's a verse in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna says, Nahi kaschit chanamapi jatu tishtati karmakrit karya tehi avasha kamar sarva prakriti jagana, that all men are forced to act helplessly according to the impulses born of the 3 modes of material nature. No one can refrain from doing something, not even for a moment. And the purport Prabhupada says that this is key. He says, unless one is engaged in the good works of Krishna consciousness and devotional service, he will be forced to be engaged. He'll be forced to be engaged in occupations dictated by the illusory energy. See, so in other words, there's no like neutral spot. It's like when you jump in the Ganges River when you go to Mayapur. You can't just say, well, I don't want to really swim. I'll just stay in one spot. Well, you can't stay in one spot because there's a current. You see, so unless you jump in that water and start swimming upstream, you're going downstream. That's the idea. So unless it's a human being, a human form of life, unless you decide to engage in devotional service, you're going to be forced to be, you're going to get swept up in engaging in sinful activities and having to suffer sinful reactions. That's stated in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna says, Jagyar tat kamanon yatra lokoyam karma bandhana tadartam karma kuntaya mukta sangha samachara. He says, work done as a sacrifice for Vishnu has to be performed. Otherwise, work will bind you to the material energy. You see? So if you're not prepared to perform jagya, Sankirtan jagya is the recommended jagya for this age, then you're going to be forced to engage in material activities and you're going to be bound up by the material reactions. So that's the big lesson that, really, we have to engage in devotional service. We were part of Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement. So we should take it seriously, engage in the Sankirtan movement seriously, and try to give it to other people. I wasn't there that year, 1975 in Mayapur. In one lecture I was giving on the Chaitanya Charitamrita. He must have quoted this verse about 12 times. Yade deke tare kaha Krishna upadesh, amada agaya guru hana tare edesh, that wherever you go, whoever you meet, tell them about Krishna. And this way become a guru, spiritual master, and enlighten everybody in the land. So that was Lord Chaitanya's mission. It was an instruction, and that's his mission. That's a Mahavakya. It's like one of the main instructions coming from Lord Chaitanya that practice Krishna consciousness and then give it to other people. That's the whole thing. You see, so that's our life in a nutshell. Be serious about engaging in the Sankirtan movement and try to be serious about giving it to other people, and then everything else will be taken care of. Everything else will be taken care of by Krishna.
Prabhu, I found your response to Raphael's question really, really interesting and helpful. I have a follow-up to Raphael's question. So, okay, so what if I'm a devotee or someone I know who's a devotee, and they got the coronavirus, and and it's hitting them in a bad way, right? Because some people get the coronavirus, like, I don't know, I was saying before, maybe I got it, a little fever, it doesn't matter, but some people, they get it and it really messes them up. Maybe they're on the verge of death. Or maybe what if you're a devotee and due to the coronavirus, you lose your employment. Okay, so now I was wondering if you could address that situation, because you're addressing the bigger picture, I'd say, especially, the whole world. How do these things befall the whole world, and what can we do to prevent these things going forward? And and let's be Krishna conscious. But now let's look at it as I'm a devotee, or someone I respect or I care about is a devotee, and something really bad, such as the coronavirus, hits them in a bad way or they lose their job? How do we view that?
Okay, well, in 1968, Prabhupada wrote a letter to Ramananda. I don't know the letter Ramananda wrote to him because they don't show the letters that devotees wrote to Prabhupada. But Prabhupada, he was asking some question about Krishna's mercy. And Prabhupada's response was, regarding Krishna's mercy upon us, regarding Krishna's bestowing mercy upon us, should be on the principle that Arjuna followed. He said Arjuna was Krishna's best friend. Krishna could have, this is paraphrasing because it's been a long time. Krishna could have just immediately awarded the battle to Arjuna, the victory to Arjuna without him doing anything. But Prabhupada says neither Krishna followed that principle nor Arjuna followed that principle. He said Arjuna had to fight to his best ability, best capacity to achieve something. But then by Krishna's, and so Prabhupada says, so ordinarily we have to, referring to Arjuna, he said, ordinarily we have to try our best to our best capacity to achieve something. And then by Krishna's grace, all of a sudden we shall see that everything will be there. This sort of help from Krishna is transcendental happiness. So the idea is this, that devotees are practical. They're practical and they act. So for instance, in the example you gave, if somebody's, got the coronavirus and their health is compromised and they lost their job, they can't work because of it. Yeah, so we do everything we can to help the person with the health, to help the person with their financial situation. But at the same time, the whole time, always not forgetting devotional service, always trying to, even in the midst of performing those what seem like mundane activities, remembering Krishna, it's all part of devotional service. When somebody's trying to become a devotee, everything you're doing is part of your devotional service. If you're trying to recover your health, that's devotion. That's part of your devotional service. And if you're trying to keep your financial situation stable, that's also part of your devotional service. So we don't, devotee's practical. He does what he has to do, and at the same time remembers Krishna and depends on Krishna, and knows that ultimately it's it's up to Krishna. It's up to Krishna. What's going to happen. So don't lose your Krishna consciousness in the process of trying to take care of material situation. That's the point. Okay. And here's a good story that Prabhupada told to illustrate that point. So there was a Brahmin. Okay, and
we lost your video, Prabhu.
Oh, sorry. Hang on. Somebody was ringing me, and I just had to knock him out there. Okay. So there was a Brahmin, and he was traveling, and he was in a situation where he didn't bring enough food, shot him with him, and so he was becoming very hungry, and he was really disturbed by it, and he was feeling very weak, and he just really felt like he needed to have something to eat, and he didn't have any facility to cook, no ingredients or anything, so he was really distressed, and so he just made a decision. You know what? I can't tolerate this. I gotta do something to deal with this. I can't tolerate it. So he was in it just so happened though, he was in this area of this neighborhood that was a very poor neighborhood. And so he knocked on the home of some people, and he explained to them this situation. He said, look, I'm a Brahmin, and I'm traveling, and I'm just, I'm miscalculated here. I really need something to eat. And they told him, well, we're Muslims. We're Muslims. And he said, well, and the way it works is that if you're Brahmin, you can't eat in the home of a Muslim. It's kind of like you become a social outcast. It's considered very, especially during those times, it was like a real no-no. And he said, well, I don't care. He just made a decision. He just couldn't tolerate it anymore. He said, I don't care. It's okay. I'll take that risk. And they further explained to him, but we're very poor. We really don't have much. And he said, that's okay. Just, just make whatever you can and please feed me, And they said, okay, they're happy to do that. So he came inside and he sat down, and after some time they brought out some food for him, and he ate that. And then, and he said, okay, thank you so much. But can you bring more? Can you bring more? And they said, well, actually, sorry, that's all we have. As we mentioned, we were very poor. We don't have. And then the Brahmin, he realized what was happening. He went, oh no, I've lost my caste, and still I am hungry. You see, he's lost his caste, and still he was hungry. So that once again, the story, the analogy is that we don't want to, in the process of dealing with our material situations, such as being sick or being, having financial difficulties, or somehow or another, you got to try to take care of these things in such a way that we don't lose our Krishna consciousness. That Brahmin, he made a mistake. He tried to deal with his material distress, but in the process of trying to deal with his material distress, well, he wasn't successful anyway, and he lost his caste. So we don't want to be in that situation where we're losing our Krishna consciousness, and even if, and we may or may not be able to solve our material situation. So yeah, good. Try to take care of the material situation, try to deal with your health, deal with your financial situation, deal with your marital situation, whatever, this situation, that situation, but always do it in such a way that you're protecting your Krishna consciousness at the same time. That if at all possible, that you're chanting your rounds, you're following the regulative principles, you have sadhana, even if you're not healthy enough to chant your rounds, listen to lectures. Listen to lectures of you. I've had that situation where I was so weak I couldn't chant. So I just listened to Prabhupada lectures all day, You just have to always somehow or another keep that connection with your devotional service while you're struggling to deal with all the problems of material existence. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you very much. Does someone else have a question?
I have a question.
Sure.
But I'm afraid it's not directly related to what Prabhupati Prabhuji said. I was wondering, one of the things that I have always found very impressive about Christianity is its concept of community worship, of the sense of a religious community. And is that something that that ISKCON is also, is that something that is also promoted by the Krishna consciousness movement? I'm not being able to frame this very well. Like, I come from a traditional Hindu background, and so most of our worship is sort of individual based. We don't have any community structures in place. And I was wondering if you have something to say about this.
Yeah, well, I mean, Prabhupada wanted devotees to care about each other. I mean, just off the top of my head, I can remember there was some letter that Prabhupada wrote where he instructed that, if one of your god brothers or god sisters falls sick, you should, make an effort, take care of them. Don't just neglect them. Just don't, it's not like, okay, well, tough luck. Anyway, I got to do my service. That shouldn't be our attitude. We should be compassionate. We don't want to become sentimental. There's always there's always a discrimination is always required, but definitely devotees want to care about each other, and even as much as possible try to help people on every different level. I mean, within reason. I mean, we can't just go and take every homeless person off the street and put them up in the ashrams or something like that. But we want to do as much as we can for people, both on a so quote unquote material level, although nothing we really do is material. If we give people prashadam, it's not material. We want to do as much as we can for people. We want to, the whole, being a devotee, because we want to help other people have a better life. So that means, our members of our community, people who aren't members of our community, that's just the nature of the devotee. So yeah, that's there. But a lot of times it's, in some places it's more developed than others, like in India during this COVID, they had, a lot of the temples had a great outreach program. They were distributing lots and lots of prasadam. And some other places weren't, we weren't as organized as some temples. Sometimes it's kind of, we maybe, we haven't developed along those lines as much as we should have, because, well, see, one thing that's different from being a Christian, being a devotee, is that, Christians have it a little bit easier in the sense that, they just, not as much is required of them. I mean, it's a lot easier to be a Christian than it is to be a pure devotee. I mean, not to, diss Christians, but you just accept Jesus Christ as your Savior. I mean, it's not a higher standard of moral and ethical character and behavior and sadhana that's kind of required of you. I mean, to make a serious attempt at stab at being a pure devotee, that requires a lot. And sometimes devotees feel like, it's all I can do to just kind of deal with my own situation, what to speak of saving the whole world. So I think, ISKCON is maybe not as developed along the lines of, serving the world, the rest of the people because of that. We're struggling in our own spiritual, neophyte spiritual existence. I mean, like, for instance, Prabhupada, there's one, recently somebody sent me a video, it was a clip of Ramaswar. He was relating how when he was with Prabhupada in 1977 on a train ride, Prabhupada was telling me, there's going to be a time when people are going to come to the millions, by the millions, because of unemployment. Unemployment's going to be a big problem. This was back in 1977. Prabhupada was saying this to Ramaswar. Unemployment's going to be a big problem. And we have to be ready to take these people in and, feed them and show them how to be, how to live off the land and be devotees. So, yeah, Prabhupada wanted that, but we haven't really achieved that. I mean, not to a very significant degree. I mean, we could show a little example, but we're not in a position to really, how would you say it, minister to people along those lines in any significant way. So we have it's something that devotees should be mindful of and we should be wanting to do. But, admittedly, we have a ways to go along those lines, but it is part of our program, but it's along with a lot of other things that we have to do. So maybe that's why we are not as developed along those lines as maybe, what you see in some of the Christian religions or churches.
Thank you.
Okay. This has been so nice to hear this philosophy, this Christian conscious philosophy this evening. That I lost track of time myself. We're running over because it's been so good. But
thank you.
Yes. So thank you so much, and thanks to all of you for participating and joining us this evening. It's a really nice event, even though we're all so distant from one another.